So I want to welcome everybody to our Restorative Leadership Healing Our Community training, and want to thank the County Office of Education in San Diego for allowing us to do this, especially free of charge to our colleagues. And we appreciate you all taking the time to, just to be able to reflect on what does this mean for us. And many of us here were in different positions. You don't have to be in an administrative role. You could just be in, honestly, any kind of role, but that where you see yourself either wanting to be a leader in the restorative justice practices, or maybe you're kind of already doing some of that work. So we'll be sending you this PowerPoint and the chat file. And just know that the recording doesn't happen in the breakout rooms, and we'll be having a number of those breakout rooms. We may send you a media release form, depending if that's needed. We would do that via email. All right, so our goals for today: to facilitate an experience with participants to increase understanding of restorative leadership while demonstrating how restorative practices can be used to help restore students and adults' sense of high value, belonging, and importance in connection to our school community. So that's kind of an important one. And then we've got the increased understanding of the importance of practicing restorative leadership as a strategy to help to restore and heal the harmed members of our school community. And just so you know, when we say the harmed members of our school community, it doesn't just mean when there's a situation that happens and somebody, causes some harm. It means there's a lot of people as a part of our school community who are coming harmed to our community, where they even last school year or the school year before, they may have experienced some level of harm in their previous school, previous grade, in the community, in their family. So, and we're serving as, I guess you could say, kind of facilitating some healing in their lives as restorative leaders. So one of the things I want to do is I want to kind of go over our community agreements here. And so I'm going to ask, let's see, Erica, would you be willing to just read through this, please?
Yes. Confidentiality, mandated reporting. Take care of your own needs. Listen without interruptions or judgment. Be authentic and honest. Share the air. Show kindness and care for others. Be empathetic and compassionate. Only share helpful comments in discussions in the chat forum. Assume best intentions.
Thank you, Erica. And Erica, you know how you mentioned in the parentheses there's mandated reporting. What does that mean to you?
I'm assuming that is the caveat for confidentiality, that if people discuss things that are mandated to be reported, that would be an exception to confidentiality.
Absolutely. Thank you. Especially if you're working with young people, right, with minors. But you definitely want to put that caveat in there that if they, you can say, hey, everything's confidential here. So, but if you mention something where somebody's harming you, or you're going to harm somebody else, or even if you're harming yourself, I have to get you help. And I am going to have to report that to get you the right help that you need. So when we look at these agreements here that Erica read for us, just want to see if we can get everybody's agreement that while we're here for this short time together, that we're going to do our best to follow these, right? And so, and if we can give us kind of like either a thumbs up to just as a kind of a nonverbal sort of agreement, like, hey, I'm good with this, I'll give it my best shot. Doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. It just means that you're agreeing to help. So thank you, everybody, for that. Appreciate it. That's very nice. I like those reactions too, that you can put like little stickers on your set. So we want to do a mindfulness. We always like to start off doing a mindfulness activity, and we definitely encourage what is it, restorative leaders, right? To try to implement this, whether in your classroom or if you're having a staff meeting, department meeting, doing like maybe a minute of just breathing, having people maybe remember who we are as educators, who we are as called to be restorers of our relationships and community. So maybe, if you would just take a minute, I'll just kind of say a few things, but just take some nice, I guess, nurturing breaths for yourself, right? I'll do that as well. And you can obviously look at the screen if you want and just kind of see that, see the trees and the water. Just take some nice, again, deep breaths. And it's almost like as if you could breathe in what you need for now, right? Your energy, focus, whatever it be, and then breathe out what you don't want to carry today. And that might be a sense of anxiety or stress or resentment or anything that you're carrying. You can just breathe it out. So just try that on your own for a few breaths. And then we just remember who we are, right? As educators, and that kind of sacred calling that we have is to serve our community. So we take another nice deep breath. And then we'll go and finish with that. Thank you. So you could do something as simple as that. You don't even have to have a visual. You can just kind of guide people like that. But it's important that we also remind people in our schools about the need to be mindful, right? That we're intentional educators. We're not just like haphazard coming, flying into work and then flying out. We're really actually, this is important work. And kind of in that indigenous mindset, this would be considered sacred work to try to help young people learn. So one of the things we want to do is ask you this question. As a restorative leader, how can you effectively help colleagues to see the necessity and the value of daily self-care practice? So one thing I want to do is, Gabe, do you mind if I just ask you a question and just ask, what's kind of like a self-care practice you use to keep yourself, to be your best self, I guess I would say?
One thing that I do both on my way to work and then on my way home from work is prior to on the drive, I'm thinking of, I know how easy it is to get for myself to get caught up in the challenges and the negativity. So I'm thinking of some positive things from that day that, have already happened or from the previous day. And as I go home, trying to at least focus on the positive. That's something I do. It's not anything major, but it's something that I feel has helped me to at least feel like I'm not bringing home burdens from the day.
I think that's a great practice, right? To integrate this sort of mindful and a focus on positive, thinking as you're going to work and as you're coming home, so that you can release that. You're not taking home all the negativity. So thank you. Jen, can you hear me? What's something that you do for yourself?
I try to do some kind of exercise every day so that I can get all the crazies out, and I can just try to have a mindfulness for my work, separate from what's going on away from school.
Oh, that's great. I really enjoy hearing that. And then what would you say to this question of like, how can a restorative leader, effectively help colleagues to see the necessity and the value of that kind of daily self-care practice?
Just having a connectiveness with other colleagues and staff that you can share what you're doing and share some of the things that are happening in your classes, and you have some of that collaboration where you feel like you're not the only one going through that. Having opportunities for colleagues to work together and collaborate and share ideas, but also just the ability for us to have relationships outside of our jobs, and being able to say, hey, we're going to go to, whether it's a happy hour or we're going to have a staff luncheon on campus, or do things together other than just what our jobs require of us.
That is really cool, Jen. Thank you for that, for reminding us that the relationships that we have at work are real relationships. It goes beyond just, hey, we're doing this work together, but we also care about each other, right? We're friends. We have lives beyond just that place. So thank you. Jen, what do you think? What's a way that you, and I know you're a busy woman, being a mother of 3 young kids, and but how do you try to take care of yourself?
I think for me, the best medicine for that is just getting outside. I can get really in my head about all the tasks I need to do, whether that's work related or at home or even with the kids or whatnot. And so even if the kids are with me, just giving everyone that space outside is really, really healing, but also daily reminders that it's necessary. And I really have to remind myself that every single day, that it's not a selfish thing to be able to take whatever time I need. And so I kind of have to practice that every single day, because I can really get caught up in the rat race, especially if I see other people that are already caught up in that in my head starts to become the norm or the healthy way of being. And then I have to remember that person may not be taking care of themselves. And so that's not a model to look after. But also that everyone kind of has a different threshold of which they need to kind of take care of themselves and what they're capable of handling. And that's okay if I'm on a different kind of threshold than somebody else too.
Oh, that's great, Jen. Thank you for that. And I really like that you mentioned going outside. It's something, I do a lot of in-house work and, like through the computer. And that means a lot to me. I feel like me connecting by walking among the trees and just being out there, seeing the sky, seeing the clouds, it's very healing for me as well. It's something I'm very committed to. And when you said that, I said, yes, that makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you. All right. So, we want to just then think about that, about how might we communicate with our colleagues, that of the importance, like Jen was just telling us, like everybody's on different wavelengths. So somebody might say, hey, I like Gabe said, hey, when I'm driving to work, and that's great. And somebody says, hey, maybe when I'm, take my friends to happy hour, or I go walk my dog, or I like to go for a little jog, or whatever works for people. Some people tell me, oh, I do meditation, I do yoga. Great. Everything that people do to try to take care of themselves is a benefit to the community. It's just what Jen said. It's not selfish. It's self-care to be your best self so that you can be your best self in service of others. Because if I don't take care of myself, I may end up like this guy just yesterday. I live here in Escondido, and I saw him driving down Broadway, and we were parked next to each other at a stoplight, and all of a sudden I saw him put his car in reverse, and he was burning rubber, but there was a car in back of him. And I was like, oh my goodness, he was on the side of me, and I could see him starting to go back actually. And the guy in back of him started backing up urgently. And I realized that it was like almost like a case of road rage, right? How easily we can get just something, if we're not well, something somebody says or does can maybe even turn into violence. So we want to obviously keep ourselves well. So thank you, everybody. So we want to do a check-in, and really when we do this, we're going to do kind of like a virtual check-in, where we're just going to choose a number between 1 and 10. And so some of you have already done this kind of check-in with us that tells us how you're feeling today. 1 meaning you feel awful, and 10 meaning you feel amazing. So you can kind of choose that number. And then we ask you to just type in like one sentence after, just saying, why do you feel like, what expresses like the reason why you chose that number. And so for me, I think I would choose probably about an 8.5, maybe. I feel pretty good. I had my walk outside this morning early, and I started my day. It's a busy time for me, but I'm happy. I'm happy to be here with my colleagues. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is go ahead, and I see some already coming in, so thank you. So 9, Tamara, way to go. Excited about this work. And Jen Hansel says 7, feel good about where I am right now, but I have a lot looming on the horizon. Lon says I'm up number 4. I'm dealing with some chronic back pain, but trying to take care of myself so I can be as present as possible. So Lon, just want you to know, just as your colleagues and people who care about you, we send you those good vibes and for healing, and we hope the best for you. And anything that we can do for you to help you feel more supported, we want to do that. And then Erica says an 8, son having great first week of high school. Wow, I had 5 students in yoga today, lots to do. All right. Mindy is an 8, lots of things going on, but feeling good. And Robert, 10. Wow, Robert, that might be the first time I've seen you put 10. Family member recently released from ICU after recovering from COVID. Wow, Robert, we celebrate with you, right? When a family can leave ICU and recover from COVID, most of us know how important and how vital that is, right? So thank you. And Maisha says 8, work is busy, but we're pushing forward. Happy that I passed my qualifying exams. Congratulations, Maisha. Excellent. And Jen says 7, balancing lots of things with having some family members with some health issues. So thank you, Jen, for your vulnerability with us, your authenticity, and blessings to your family. So 80 Maples, 9, and grateful. And then Tracy Thompson, 8, blessed to have an opportunity to make a difference today. Yeah, it's so right. Every day, Tracy, I know that's who you are, and we try to do the same thing. So thank you for reminding us. And Gabe is 8 and happy to be here. So one of the reasons why we do the check-in is just to quickly check, how are our colleagues doing? It's almost like, now we know, for example, Lon has some chronic back pain, so we want to be able to say any way that we can support you, right? So if we were in person, I would be like trying to see, is there a better seat that I can get her? Does she need to stand up sometimes? So things like that, if I don't know though, Lon, if you were my student or something, or even one of the staff, if I saw you like kind of making faces or kind of showing signs that you were frustrated, I might take it personally, not if I don't know what's going on with you. So the check-in allows us to actually, find out what's happening. And usually as human beings, when we find out what's happening with another human being, we grow in understanding, and we also grow in empathy with them. And that's what we encourage the restorative leaders to do. As much as possible, do this with your colleagues. and then so that you can find out how they're doing and then treat them with that empathy and compassion. So fortunately, we have our colleague, Tracy Thompson here. He's the executive director of our juvenile court and community schools. And we invited him to come because he is, in our estimation, and I've known him for many, many years, but he is one of I think one of the most mindful restorative leaders that I've ever seen. And I've seen him be that leader with other people and also with many, many students and with many people who have been traumatized and harmed by other people. And he has consistently been that person, not only for them, but for myself as well. So Tracy, would you be willing to kind of just share a little bit about kind of what restorative leadership means for you?
For me, given that I have the opportunity to serve some of the most vulnerable children in San Diego County via the juvenile court community schools, serving students who've been expelled or incarcerated on probation, pregnant, parenting, and foster, it's really important that we have our staff not bring their luggage to work with them. What I mean by that is our kids have so many things that they're carrying with them. We cannot be carrying our luggage to work when we are addressing our students. And for me, as you stated, Anthony, that mindfulness activity, the checking in, the circling up, and how do you, get yourself together and get ready for work. And as I heard, people are, colleagues at happy hour. There's someone on the Zoom actually that introduced us to sushi a long time ago, and now I'm hooked. And I just want to thank that person because initially it was like, I don't know about this, but one of my things is going to eat some sushi and a little sake, and I'm just chilling and winding down. But for me, it's important that as restorative leaders that everyone brings value to the table. In particular, during this last year and a half, where we're dealing with some very difficult times, not just with the pandemic, but social justice matters. How do you truly be there for your children? How do you truly be there for your schools? How do you truly be there for the community? And for me, it's important that I got to check in with myself to get ready because I know guaranteed there's going to be some heavy lifting when I come to work. But also see that there's value to every single person I come in contact with. When you're going to see a kid who's locked up for murder and is 14 years of age that has very little hope, I got to bring hope to that child. I got to have my staff bring hope to that child. So with that in mind, I go about the business of modeling what I expect of my staff. 360 folks, I can't be there for every child directly, but I certainly can be there for my staff. So I got to model for them what is the expected behavior. I got to model for them how to treat people. And too often people in my position like the power trip. And Anthony would tell you, I like to keep it real. That title doesn't mean anything to a kid. They don't care if you doctor this or do you care about me? Do you have high expectations of me? And with that, you can still hold people accountable. Oftentimes people are thinking caring is about enabling. That's the last thing our children need. They need to know the truth. Life is not going to be handed to them on a silver platter. So you got to have high expectations, a lot of care, and accountability. I call it putting money in the bank. Knowing you have to take some money out eventually, you got to make some deposits. And the deposit is about that high expectation, love, and care. And it goes a long way. You're dealing with students that might have issues with where they live and rival gangs, or even situations with my young ladies with pimps and things like that. How do you mitigate that? And realizing as a school, as a person that is employed by a school district, I got to recognize that I can't do it by myself. I reach out to our partners. I reach out to people with lived experiences. I reach out to anyone I can to let them know that I need your village to help our children. And with that, we have reaped a lot of great results. There's someone on the call that knows I coach. That's one of my highs. To see that a young person I've been able to touch has the opportunity to succeed in life because of what we do and what we're all about. Oftentimes I'm running from work straight to practice, wearing a suit. It's a shame that some kids like, man, you coming from court? Or do you have to go to church today? So it's important to me to model that, you can still be cool and wear a suit. You can be yourself, speak the truth, and wear a suit. You can be down for your neighborhood and wear a suit. So for me, it's very important that we never forget where we came from, remember our struggles, and we use that to support our children and our families. So that's a very brief opportunity to chat with you about what it means to be a restorative leader, in my opinion. There's a lot of people that depend on us, and I'm glad that Anthony continues to have these types of opportunities for people to talk, to gather, and to serve one another. But ultimately, if I were to leave you with something, it's all about relationships. Cultivating relationships. Again, as I mentioned, our parents and the community at times, they don't give a crap about what your title is. They care about, how you helping them out. Building relationships, not shaming them or blaming them. How do we work together to achieve the common goal of being the best we can for our kids? So for me, just a little bit about my world, and I coach track as well, so it's all year round. But when you look at it from a personal perspective, and have my own children, I want my kids to know that I am there for them as well, but I need the community to know that that's my child.
Wow.
That's my child. And so I got to make sure that I got to walk that talk, because if I'm not, my own family could be at risk. I'm gonna say, your dad worked for the system, he ain't about nothing. It put my own family at risk. So again, be true to yourself. Don't forget where you came from, and walk the talk. That goes a very long way.
And Tracy, I have a question for you. I know, you've done this. You really implemented that restorative practices. You started with staff, because I've seen you do that, like circle your staff up. You've done that often, where you've had them check in with each other and get to know each other and have fun together, but really to connect on that human level. And can you just speak on that?
Yeah, everyone has challenges. And like I mentioned before, I believe it's my responsibility to find everyone's strength. So operate from a strength-based perspective. I feel it's my responsibility to build that culture, build that relationship. And I find ways to acknowledge people doing the right thing, because too often we quickly remind them they're doing the wrong thing. So for me, again, cultivating relationships, having high expectations, knowing that everyone has a gift and a strength, and allow them to bring it to the table really does change the culture. We were having some difficult times about 6 years ago in our organization. And when I was tasked by becoming the executive director, one of the first things I did was, we got to circle up. We got to have a circle and talk about, what are you here? What are you all about? What is your mission? What is your vision? Because I'm gonna let you what mine is. We start talking about things like eradicating institutionalized racism. We start talking about social justice matters. Not a lot of people want to talk about that, but I think it's important that you should know where I stand, and I'm not going to waver from that. So with that, I've been able to negotiate and work and build relationships with people that oftentimes I view them as the enemy. Probation, the judges, and folks like that. Now we have the lowest incarceration rate in several years in San Diego County, because we knew that incarceration wasn't working, so why we continue to do it? So how do you get that message across without being offensive? But that message was clearly heard, because I had to cultivate a relationship and use the data to show that this is not working, so let's do something different. I was able to show another example with supporting my pregnant and parenting teams. When you see a young lady 12 years old pregnant, man, that's tough, right? And that's and I've had 3 in this past year and a half. So how do you be there for that child? A child having another child, and recognizing that you can't do it alone. So we partner with organizations. I have a school called Lindsay, where there's low-income housing upstairs. There's a medical center 2 doors away. It's that community school vision, that village that's going to help raise that child. I just opened up a new school called the Soul Academy, the Cantor Boys and Girls Club on Imperial. In that building, we have a coding school. We have the Heartbeat, which is training young children to learn how to play the marching bands that the Historical Black College has provided. We have the Historical Black College Tour coming through there. We have an early child education program coming through there. So it's about addressing multiple generations, but realizing that I cannot do it by myself and relying on the entire community to lift up every single child.
Wow. Well, thank you, Tracy, for, just everything you do, but also just taking the time to be with us for a few minutes to give us that perspective and to help us understand when you talk about relationships, you're not just talking about relationships with a few people, but you really truly are in relationship with many, many partners throughout the community. And you reach out to make relationships even with those who may have done you wrong and your people wrong in some ways in the past. And you truly have reached out as a restorative leader to restore and to create bridges where they've been necessary to be able to help the whole community. So thank you for your example. We just appreciate that. Just hearing that, just hearing your commitment and your personal commitment as a coach and a dad and just a community member. So thank you for all you do. We really appreciate you.
Thank you all as well. One last project I failed to mention is I'm working with Pastor Miles Pearson. There's a curriculum out called the Third Option. Right, the third option talks about our blind spots. I want to mention that because we all have our own blind spots. And so I'm very fortunate to pilot it in our juvenile court community schools, but also I'm getting probation and law enforcement interest in using that curriculum as a tool as well to help build relations. Again, there's some trying times right now. We talked about, pandemic and social justice matters. We talked about the election last year. How did that impact relationships? Right. So again, there's a lot of work to be done, but I leave you with, you just got to be true to yourself. Do you, be you. I can't be you. I can't be Robert. I can't be Andy. I can be me and be the best version of that. And that works well for me.
That's excellent. Thank you, Tracy. And I know you got a lot of stuff to get done, but appreciate you taking the time again for us.
All right. Thank you, guys. It's good seeing you all.
Take care. All right. So we're going to get back to it. And we have an activity that we're going to be looking at some data. We feel that restorative leaders really should be able to look at data. It's just something we have to do. We have to learn, even if it's something that you don't feel as comfortable with, but there's ways for you to kind of simplify it, look at it, and then discuss it, right? To be able to reflect on it. What does it say to you as an educator? So, because we're asking the question, like, why restorative leadership, right? Well, we know kind of what Tracy was talking about. There's a need for restoration and healing, right? In our young people and also in our staff. And that I know he talked about intentionally honoring relationships and truly highly valuing each member. But what we're going to do is we're going to, we have a document that Robert's going to be sharing with us. And that document is going to show you two different California Healthy Kids surveys. One of them is the 2017 and to 2019. And then the next one that one's the statewide. And then the second page is going to show you the San Diego countywide 2020, 2021. I want you to take a couple of minutes to review the highlighted parts of these two pages. So it won't take you long. And I know there's a lot of smart people in here, so you should be able to look at this. And as you're looking at it, just kind of start to kind of like see what is popping out at you. I know I've highlighted some things, but it's because we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted just to show you what's going on in California, right? And much of what I'm seeing here has been going on for several years, because I've been looking at these California Healthy Kids surveys for some time now. So just kind of read through these things, what is it saying to you as you're looking at some of this. Some of the key things that we look at within restorative justice practices is school connectedness, caring adult relationships. So on the San Diego County one, which is very recently gotten here, that you see that it's highlighted: school connectedness, caring adult relationships, meaningful participation, school perceived as a very safe or safe. And so what I want you to notice is those numbers on the right-hand side are the percentages of students in the grades like 7, 9, and 11. And then the NT is more like in different types of alternative sites. And look at the percentages of students that are saying they feel connected with school. And then just kind of check, what does that make you feel to know that basically 6 out of 10 students are saying, at least in those from 7th through 11th, are saying that they're connected? Or what about, see the caring adult relationships? About 6 out of 10 say that there's one caring adult on their school campus. 6 out of 10. Meaning if you had like, let's say your school had 1,000 students, that would mean 400 students were saying, I don't think that there's one adult that I can trust here, that cares about me in that way. So I just want you to think about what some of this means, like the meaningful participation. I mean, that really it's about 28% is the average on that, of that they feel that they have meaningful participation in their school. And that school is perceived as very safe or safe. About 71% are saying that, meaning almost 30% are saying it's not safe. So what we want you to do now that you had a chance to kind of review these things, we're going to have you go into a triad. Robert will put us into a triad, and we just want you to then share, what does that mean to you to know that this is what our own San Diego County kids are saying, and also our statewide in California, that they're saying similar things. And then, just kind of, if you would just think about that for yourself and talk about it. And then we'll come back. All right. So, Jen, when you kind of had a chance to look at this data, what does it say to you? What's kind of the reaction you have?
It's definitely a little bit shocking, especially when you put it into perspective. You're talking about, if you had 1,000 students, that would mean, 400 of your students would not feel connected, would not feel like they had an adult that they could trust. And it's just really sad. And then as a parent, I think about my own kid in our education system, or my own kids, and, thinking about, what if my kids were one of those 400 students? And so I was just kind of reflecting on that, on like how much, I want my kids to feel connected. And it's just a sad thing that the place that they spend most of their time at, they're feeling disconnected from.
Yeah. Thank you for making that personal too. Like, you got to think about that sometimes. What if that was my child reporting that and they had to go to that school every day? So thank you, Jen. And Robert, what about you?
No, absolutely. I was had a chance just to compare this to some of the to our last year's counter report, and of course you don't want to look at these numbers and think of as I look at these numbers, it's just something that it quantifies these very complex concepts that we talk about daily. But when you look at something like this, it's of course disheartening. And then you try to look for bits of success, I guess, if you can even put it that way. But I was looking at that substance use category, and compared to other years, that you do see these numbers going down, some double digits turning to single digits. But also I had noticed too that that new vaping category. So I mean, it is. It's just definitely some concerning data, but also, I mean, at least we are at in a place where we're collecting, data at this level, can also, disaggregate it and hopefully use these as continuation points to continue improving this work. I know that we can't think of this as just starting points, because a lot of these long-term, relationship building and school climate improvements aren't going to happen in short term. And also we are taking into account a lot of the extra difficulties that COVID brought. I'm looking at meaningful participation in any year. I mean, those numbers may not be as high as we would want, but just thinking about the extra difficulties that a lot of our schools are experiencing this year when trying to create those experiences. And what is also encouraging is we've been able to know that there has been meaningful participation, just as one concept that has happened. But I mean, it's just also an acknowledgement to just how different these past couple of years have been, and that there's definitely some unique challenges that never had to be considered before.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's important when we look at data to be able to think in context, right? So what year is that coming from, and what was going on during those years? And so that's always really important. And it is good to kind of look at, hey, what are we doing well? Well, we're actually improving through our substance abuse prevention education. It's actually improving, right? That's a good thing. So I think what it should tell us as educators is, hey, we know how to do some things right when we focus in and we actually intentionally and strategically educate, right, and consistent. We can actually make a difference. We can move the needle. And I think that's what I'm thinking about with this restorative work is we need to intentionally, strategically, and consistently move the needle, because to me, those numbers are absolutely and completely unacceptable. To me, it would be like not one red flag, it would be 10 red flags going up. So I, really kind of look at that and I say, hey, let's do something about it, right? And that's what all this is about. So thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody, for engaging in that. Again, it's really trying to develop those, skills to kind of look at the data and then be able to check, how is this data speaking to you? What is it making you feel as an educator? AD Maples, would you be willing to kind of just give us your reactions on that?
Absolutely. And thank you for allowing me to share. First and foremost, my name is Lisa. The AD is Assistant Director, and that's from distance learning and Zooming with students. So
thank you.
I should have changed my screen name, but I am Lisa Maples. And one thing that I shared when I looked at that data, I was sharing that a lot of my experience, a lot of attention is given to the students who have concerning behaviors, and then the students that are high achieving students. And so because they are demonstrating things that draw attention to them, we tend to focus time and energy in those places. But there's this middle ground of students that are suffering in silence that, for whatever reason, they're not drawing attention to themselves, but are feeling disengaged, not connected, haven't been able to identify a caring adult, but we don't know their story because they're not loud in their behaviors or their presence. And so that's where my thoughts went when I saw the numbers of, what does that 30% look like? Or what does that 20% look like? And it made me think of those students that they just kind of go through school and we never learn their stories. We never understand their perspective because they're not drawing attention to themselves. And then I also really liked what Jen shared, and it really resonated with me, that this time is much of a tragedy and crisis that it is. It's also a time that we can kind of shift that paradigm as a time to restructure, because a lot of learning has come through the pandemic about, students' social, emotional health and their needs. And so this is a time that we've been able to refocus and restructure some of our programming to address the needs of students, and especially those students that are suffering in silence.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, and I say that Lan really agrees with you there. She, that you're right, that we have to be aware of those kids that are kind of going under the radar and going sometimes for years and they're not making waves. So we just kind of keep having them go through, but we have to understand, like you use the phrase, they're suffering in silence. And we have to reach out to them to find out who they are and what's important, what's their passions. So thank you for helping us. And you also said, now is the time to do it, when we actually are having this ability to focus on the social emotional development of our young people. So thank you. Maisha, would you be willing to kind of just chime in? How was that? How did that data make you feel or react?
We had a great conversation in our group about the data, and what really resonated with me was how the students felt disconnected and not a part of the school community. So as restorative leaders, we want to make sure that we are building the capacity of our site staff and sharing this data with them so they are aware of the disconnect that the students are feeling in the classroom, so we can reevaluate the systems that we have in place at our school to make sure that what we are presenting and sharing with our kids is a reflection of them, and making sure that they feel connected and a part of the school community. Our group, let's see, really felt like this was a great opportunity for restorative practices to be integrated in the school community. And a lot of the data could be changed if we were implementing more restorative practices and just building that capacity up from our teachers. So we centered our conversations around proactive ways, we can support teachers through learning more restorative practices, and how that kind of lends itself in the classroom to be a more restorative environment.
God, thank you, Maisha. I think, I really heard something for me really important, as you said, we need to share this data with all of our schools. All of our educators should be able to see this data, and it's not just sitting on like in some file somewhere, but this is important because this is the voice of our young people throughout our state. And then I love that you said, we need to then support our staff, our colleagues, so they can get better at being able to do this work. And then you also had mentioned, and it's really important then that we develop our curriculum and our lessons so that the kids see themselves in that it becomes relevant to them and that they feel represented there. So thank you for that. Tamara, what about yourself? What was your reaction to that?
Well, I was in the group with Maisha and Lon. I don't see her up there yet right now, but I think meaningful participation was the most important for me, because it's just students don't feel a part of a school if they're not able to do things and be a part. So we have to create ways for them to participate. And even as a teacher, participation is the new, project-based learning. And that's how students collaborate and then learn these social skills together and they'll build relationships and feel more a part of the community. So it comes down to like project-based learning in the classroom that can get messy, but students learn. And I'm excited. Yeah, I can go on.
Well, that's important, Tamara, because what I've noticed, the difference between students sitting in rows and just kind of being taught what they have to spit back out on the test, and then project-based learning, I see students sitting together, usually around a table, almost like in a circle where they can see each other and they're engaging, having to share ideas. And it's also challenging too. So, and that will engage people at different levels. And I've seen that many times. So thank you for that. So let's go back now. Actually, it's 1:58. So why don't we take our first break? We'll take up with these kinds of trainings. Your engagement makes all the difference. And we know that you're only going to get out of this what you put into it, right? So if you engage well into this, and you'll get a lot out of it. We need, as restorative leaders, we need to be data driven, right? And we need to help our schools be data driven. And just consider what types of data you might need to access in order to measure if the school's restorative justice practices efforts are improving some of your key desired outcomes. So when I think about like what might be some of your key desired outcomes at your school, Gabe, can you hear me? I just wanted to ask you, what would be some of your key desired outcomes at your school? Like, what would you like to see kind of improve there at your schools? What are some of the key things?
I think parent engagement.
Okay.
I think that's one that just comes to mind.
And that's a good one.
Yeah.
By the way, let's just stay there for a moment, Gabe, because I think that's a key thing. And by the way, your concern on that is a concern of almost every school I've been to in this county. They pretty much all tell me the same thing. Like, man, we got to get our parents more engaged. It's like, okay, so the key is then to ask yourself, okay, well, what kinds of things could we do within the restorative justice practices realm to help them feel more engaged? And one of the things that I know I've been involved in some of these parent meetings, and I'll circle them up, and we teach them about how to do check-ins, right? How to do small group activities, and to come back into the larger group the way the kind of our flow is. And so what we found is that parents are like, "Wow, that was the best meeting I've ever been to." It's like, "Oh, that's great to hear," but the hope is that parents would begin to experience the engagement at a different level, and then they'll talk to other parents, right? And so that you'll get more parents engaged in your meetings and your activities, and that and they're talking about relevant things, right? But they're done in a way where they can grow, and you could easily measure that by just the sign-in sheets. Right? Like how many people signed in the September meeting, and then what about how are we doing in December or January or February? Like, has it improved progressively? And then kind of finding ways to, again, in a relevant way, engage them even in leadership beyond just your typical PTA type of thing. So it's kind of like, I guess, then thinking about what's that data you want to be looking at. So thank you. And Jen Hansel, what might be one thing that you would want to see, like a key desired sort of outcome that you would like to see at your school?
I was just writing some notes down, and parent engagement, obviously, the big one. But the other one is creating systems that are not now in place to provide students an opportunity to succeed before they fail. I think a lot in education, kids don't succeed, and then we put a Band-Aid on it. We try to fix it after the fact. And I think if we could get something in place where kids had resources for success before they got to a point where they were frustrated or felt like they couldn't dig themselves out, or those types of things, providing systems for student success that are embedded in their school day, so that they don't feel like they have to try to do it on their own time after school when they might be taking care of little brothers and sisters, or have jobs or things like that. Provide those things. Yeah, the systems for success in the school day.
I love that, Jen. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but your comment does connect a bit with Lisa's earlier comment, where she says there's kids that are kind of flowing under the radar, and maybe they're not acting out just yet or anything like that. But you're talking about reaching them before as a prevention. And one of the things that we say in the restorative justice practices world is, if we could get into a habit of circling up the kids who are tending to sit in the back and just kind of be under that radar, they're going to be seen a lot more, and they're going to be asked to speak with us, right? They're going to be asked to have a voice, and then we have an opportunity to tell them how much we value them. And so that in itself becomes a preventative type of thing, where it's engaging them at a time where there's no problem at all, right? They're just coming together to do simple check-ins or discuss content within their classes, or just it could be different kinds of even fun activities that begins to engage them. So sometimes what people then will look at is they'll say, hey, I want to look at then if I'm trying to do prevention, am I reducing the office referrals for negative behavior over time? So they kind of keep track of that. They look monthly. What's that? Is there a certain class or a certain couple of classes where the teacher tends to send kids out more than others? And then it's about, how do we support that teacher so that they can learn ways to connect with their kids at a deeper level, maybe again in circle. Maybe they don't feel comfortable running the circle by facilitating the circle, but maybe you do. And you're that person that goes in to model for them. And pretty soon they catch on and they're engaging with the kids like they've never done in their entire educational career. And then they find, I'm sending less kids out. You know why? Because you're connected to them in relationship, how Tracy was telling us. You're more understanding, you're more empathetic because you've listened to them. You're more trauma informed because you've actually heard their story. So those are kind of some of the important things. Thank you for bringing that up, Jen. What we want to do is just kind of just look at this for a moment, this kind of a high priority of a restorative leader. Jen Vermillion, could I ask you to read this for us, please? Thank you.
So, high priority of restorative leaders. We must work intentionally, strategically, and consistently to restore/heal the oppression/harm that has caused students and staff to lose trust and hope in our school community. Some of this oppression and harm caused trauma that is generational, yet we are challenged as leaders to find ways to restore people's sense of dignity, belonging, and safety in school.
Thank you, Jen. So I know that's kind of a heavy statement that you read, but it's important because we know this exists in every school that I've been to, at least. But what does it mean to you?
Well, I think for me a couple things that kind of stand out to me. And one is also recognizing the students, but also the staff that have lost trust and hope in our school community.
Wow.
And recognizing that as leaders, we are leaders to both our students and the adults that we serve. But also helping them to recognize that even some of that generational harm has been experienced by our students, but have also been experienced by our staff. And so I guess the silver lining there being that if we can help one another to see that in some ways there are some shared experiences there, then maybe we can help each other to heal.
Wow, that's powerful. Love everything that you said. Thank you. And Erica, what about yourself? What does this mean to you?
I think just doing the modeling, and I was kind of thinking about that earlier too, with how do we share that self-care? How do we share that importance? And I think that at least I learn experientially. And so I just try to include the self-care in any interaction or professional development that I do, and anything, so that then they feel it, they experience it and feel it and be like, oh yeah, it really is as easy as taking a few deep breaths.
Wow, that's powerful, Erica. Thank you for all of that. And because it reminds me, some people, believe it or not, they have experienced trauma in math. They have felt dumb. They felt demeaned and devalued when, parents talked to them. It's like, why aren't you doing that? Or, it's not that hard. Or, people have demeaned their feelings. And so there's trauma connected to math, literally, so, and especially, if you're dealing with a student who has some kind of learning difference, and it's like reading is difficult, writing is difficult, a lot of things in school can be kind of traumatic for them because it makes them feel dumb. And so it's important then that we help the teachers understand, hey, their social emotional wellness, as Erica was saying, is so important. It's the foundation of all of our learning. So thank you for that. Lon, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Would you be willing, Lon, to read this for us?
Sure, no problem. Defining restorative leadership. Restorative leaders emphasize the importance of positive relationships as central to building community. They promote values and principles that use inclusive, collaborative approaches. They build systems that promote restorative support that is intentionally, strategically, and consistently implemented as a way to promote and strengthen positive, transformational school and organizational culture. Restorative leaders model through every interaction a way of communicating that empowers and helps restore trust within all members of our school and organizational community. Restorative leaders help all school and organization members to participate in the restoration of others.
So I know that was a lot, Lon, so thank you for reading it, first of all. But then if you would just kind of look it over, and was there a phrase that you read that kind of resonates more deeply with you? Or is there anything that you would be able to say about any of this?
Too many things. The thing that I kind of focus in on is this idea of positive transformational school and organizational culture. Mm-hmm. And I think of that as such a tall order, right? Because there's kind of earlier that first question you asked about self-care and like, how can we get others to see the importance of it? I think is the fact that it's generally not seen as important or is seen as something that can be pushed to the side, something that's not weaved into like how we do business in schools is the result of culture. And so I think about how, for example, like we can't deny the culture of an organization or our communities, our families, whatever, and that impact that the well-being of that community has on us as individuals. So if we exist in school cultures that don't see the importance of self-care, even if I tell myself every single day, right? Like, this is important, this is important, this is important. It's hard to always fight back against the culture of the school that you're in. And so when I think about restorative leadership, it's about modeling. A lot of people has said like walk the talk. Mm-hmm. And it's also about really about modeling it, doing it, and prioritizing it and really matching what you're saying is important to you as a person, right? So if I'm saying, I believe in these restorative principles, which oftentimes as leaders like require humility as well, like, am I modeling that? And so how does my kind of values match what I'm saying I'm about, and how's that matching with my action? And then that's kind of what I'm thinking about is like, there's all these other elements of, culture that really impact us. And I think it's important for leaders to know what are those cultural algorithms that exist in our schools or in our organizations. Like, what are they? Like, could you describe them? Like, because, when you walk into a school or an organization or a workplace, you can feel the vibe. And can you articulate what it is that you're feeling? And I think when we do that, that's the first step to being like, okay, so if it's that right now, what are we trying to move?
That's powerful to it's funny, in some ways to hear you talk about, hey, yeah, you can feel the vibe, but you're saying, but how do we strategically change that vibe in some ways to move to where we want to move this, right? And it's very powerful hearing you talk about the culture and also that people have to model by living what they say they're going to do. So thank you for that. And then Lisa, what about you? Does anything in here resonate with you?
Yes, I loved everything that Lan said. That was really powerful. What resonates with me is the model, every interaction in a way of communicating that empowers and helps to restore trust. For me, one of the things that I'm really big on is how we talk about students and families, the language that we use. And so, as a leader, I have to be very mindful of it and not to make generalizations and put labels. And that applies to staff as well. Behaviors doesn't define who the child is or who the adult is. And so really modeling that and making sure that students understand that when they do have, infractions, this does not define them, and they can recover and they can restore. So that's what stood out to me is modeling the communication.
That's powerful, right? To be very intentional and strategic about our communication. The words that we use hold power, especially when we're in a position of authority. If you've ever noticed, if somebody who is a kind of a bigger boss says something, everyone's like, oh, it just has that power to it. So it means we also have to take the responsibility that comes with that about, like you said, don't just say things that are maybe using stereotype type of language or things that are demeaning or devaluing in any way, right? Because that language is super important. So thank you for helping us really hone in on that and be conscious of it. So, all right, let me now go to this. And we saw this in a couple of the different trainings that we've had, that human beings are happier, more cooperative and productive, and more likely to make positive changes in their behavior when those in positions of authority do things with them rather than to them or for them. And I think the question for all of us as restorative leaders is, what does that mean to us to do things with people rather than to them or for them? And, what does it mean in our real daily life? Like Lisa was saying, in our language, and as Lan was saying, in the way we model the behavior that we're hoping to see, and also that we even understand the culture of what we're trying to create. So the next activity we have is to identify and share with your colleagues what you think are the most important characteristics of a restorative leader. This is in your opinion now. And we'd ask one person to volunteer in the triad to, take some notes, just of the list that you all develop of what you think are the most important characteristics of a restorative leader.
So the qualities listed were that the approach and interactions be personalized, including respect for the individual rather than a number kind of thing. And that the leader express appreciation and act with authenticity, act and speak with authenticity, and to be proactive and not waiting for problems to come up, but anticipating challenges, and utilizing an equity mindset that included diverse perspectives. And lastly, modeling, walking the walk.
All right, thank you. That was excellent. Wow, that was a lot. All right, so, and the next group, who was the reporter for the next group?
So we had three main things that we kind of talked about. One of them was the fact that, the person who leads can't be resistant to change. They have to kind of have that mindfulness to change and be looking forward to improvement, and looking to move forward with people, not just because they have ideas, and really looking through a social justice lens, and having the perspective, looking around and seeing what the dynamics are that are happening in that school and how people approach, whether it's curriculum, whether it's professional development, whatever it is. And then the last one was, and that has a lot to do with trust and integrity of the person themselves who's the leader, because the people who are listening to the leader have to trust that that person is going to act in their best interest, and also in the best interest of the students that are involved or all the stakeholders. So just having the integrity that what that person says, they're actually going to walk the walk. They're going to be the ones to back up what they say with action, and not just say something for the sake of saying something.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Wow. Thank you for that. So yeah, what we'll do is we'll send you this slide with the PowerPoint so that you'll have this. But if you look at it, it's I'll just kind of go like this. So it's humble, approach and interactions be personalized, express appreciation, act and speak with authenticity, be proactive, use equity mindset with diverse perspectives, modeling, open to change, move forward with people. And that with is kind of more capitalized probably. Use a social justice lens, be aware of the dynamics of the school, and then have that trust and integrity. So thank you. That's excellent. That's what we're hoping. We create a nice list like that will be from our group. And now just on this paradigm shift, just want to see if I could ask one of you to kind of read through this. And Gabe, would you be willing to kind of read, like you see where it says oppressive leadership and then restorative leadership? Would you be willing to just kind of read the difference between oppressive leadership and then restorative, just go back and forth on that?
So oppressive leadership is all staff and students accountable to the leader, or the restorative leadership is all staff and students accountable to each other. Oppressive leadership is the leader tells staff students their tasks and responsibilities. Restorative is all staff and students help to develop their tasks and responsibilities. On the oppressive side, leaders' voice and ideas are most important. Restorative is staff and student voice and ideas are encouraged and honored. All voices are essential. Oppressive leadership, staff are anxious about being evaluated. Students are anxious about being graded. On the restorative end, leader develops supportive and collaborative evaluation and grading. Oppressive leadership, the leader is the disciplinarian feared by students and staff. Restorative leader, the leader empowers others and develops collaborative accountability. Oppressive leadership, the leader discourages complaints and challenges to their authority. Restorative leadership, the leader welcomes challenging feedback and facilitates dialogue for community solutions.
That's really helpful, Gabe. Now, I know you read a lot there, but was there one of these that kind of popped out at you a little bit more than another or anything like that? Was you kind of read through those?
I think the last one for me, it's sometimes it can be challenging it's hard not to take things personally as a leader, right? And so especially if you've put a lot of time and energy into something, and sometimes you realize it's not working, but it's just hard sometimes to get that kind of feedback. But so having a forum where and an environment where people feel like it's not just simply going through the motions for asking their opinion, but really you value that and it means something to you, and you have to be willing to not take that personally.
Wow, that's powerful that you are growing in that way of being able to accept that, because that takes humility, right? On a leader's, like yourself, it takes humility and And I know that oftentimes leaders are kind of lightning rods of all the staff. They like you're the one that's blamed for a lot of stuff that may not even be your fault, and it can be it can feel harmful in some ways, like because we're human beings, right? And you mentioned to not take it personally. How do you try to do that?
With some experience, you kind of, initially, you do tend to respond out of emotion, or sometimes, everyone's frustrated. And so, you kind of let that get the best of you. So for me, I try to be as transparent with folks as possible when it comes to making decisions and including them in the hope that, at least we can have like the full picture of what's gone into a decision. But yeah, I would say it's easier said than done. But I think I've found just even systems at our school that we've developed over time, like PLCs and things like that, where they've just allowed for folks to have a voice. And I found them to be very valuable as we make decisions. We're not making them in isolation, but hopefully making an informed decision. So I don't know if I really answered the question, but I think systems is a big part of it, and just making sure that, you're helping to establish that environment and trying to just not react out of emotion, really, if as much as possible.
Well, that I really appreciate that, Gabe, because it sounds to me like you do the prevention. They always say prevention is way better than having to intervene later, right?
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you really do what you can, whether it's in PLCs or collaborative kinds of decision making, and informing people, being transparent is what I heard you say. That then people feel like they had a voice. Right? It's not just kind of coming down from King Gabe, boom, and, with your scepter and everything. So that, but what that does is it prevents a lot of that sort of, I guess, negative engagement with them, because you're like, hey, I tried my best to engage you, and I gave you a chance to have a voice. And I was hoping you would express your concerns if you had them or whatever, but we try to come up with a collaborative decision here. And then, so in some ways, you kind of prevent that, but then at different times you said you have to dig deep to not take things personally, because sometimes honestly, even colleagues can be mean, right? And you can feel attacked sometimes, right? You're a human being. So,
well, and especially in the current climate, I mean, a lot of folks are feeling overwhelmed. And so it's not even necessarily, when they're reacting in that way, it may not even really be about the topic on the table or the issue at hand. It's really just a culmination of the way that folks are feeling about things. And sometimes, people react, those emotions just kind of all come to a head, and it's not always great, but I do think that it's just part of it is understanding the context a little bit as well.
That's really good. Thank you, Gabe. I really appreciate it. I know you got to get out to the kids right now, and hopefully you'll come back and join us again.
I will. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. So we're going to go to this small group share. And it's now this one, I'm hoping that you can engage in this. Describe ways leaders have used oppressive leadership in schools or organizations. So I'm assuming you've been in different environments and you've seen oppressive leadership. And how did that make you feel? And how did you and or others react to that oppressive leadership? So it may take you a minute just to think about it, just about when you've seen that kind of leadership, and how did it make you feel when you were either around it? How did you see it made others feel as well? Jen Hansel, would you be willing to share it all?
just me or kind of what my group resonated?
You could speak about yours or something you learned from the group. It's fine.
I would say that what kind of resonated from the whole conversation is when leaders aren't really present. They don't really know what's going on with individual people. They haven't taken the time to establish those relationships. And they just kind of, as a result, people feel like they're not valued. People feel like maybe they're being criticized. People feel like, they're not being considered. And sometimes that makes people a little resentful.
Yeah.
So I think the whole not being present thing, and it comes across as you don't care about me.
I thank you for saying that, Jen. I think we should all be listening to her going, yes, if you're in any kind of position of leadership, you got to make sure that you're present, you're out there with your people, because otherwise what they're going to do is they're going to start interpreting that in their own way. And you don't want that, right? You want them to be like, for you to be so transparent, you're present and you're giving the message you want to give as a leader. So thank you. And Maisha, what about you? What's kind of came to mind for you?
So we talked about just the microaggressions that occur in the workplace, and just being one of the few African Americans, as you like move up in leadership and education, it becomes more of an isolating space. So you can feel the sense of just microaggressions kind of just trying to isolate you or, take you away from places where your voice needs to be. Like we need to be at the table having those conversations, about our marginalized students, and how that makes you feel. Like there's that fear associated with that, like the fear in a sense of not belonging, and then just that isolation, microaggressions can cause, in our learning environment. So.
Wow, that's powerful. Yeah, thank you for also helping us. Yeah, I think, and then Erica, would you?
I want to add just to that. I'm listening to How to Be an Anti-Racist, and Ibram Kendi renamed microaggressions racist abuse, which I think is a lot more apt, because microaggressions kind of sounds a little bit like a cute name. Just wanted to throw that in there.
But what if the microaggressions aren't race-based?
Then I guess that's not
microaggressions. Then I don't know. Just trying to figure it out.
So there may be, time for either or, but yeah, thank you for that.
I hear you, because it could be gender, related to gender or, sexual orientation. You never know, but it doesn't feel good when you're trying to be in a space where you're there to support students. You have a place at the table. It's your responsibility, to be there, to be the voice of, the students you're there to represent. So, I just think it's an unproductive form of leadership when you're not valuing, the people that are in place to support, the progress, of our students, especially, our marginalized students.
Yeah, absolutely, Maisha. And I think, you mentioned that it creates kind of a fear, like almost like a culture of fear, right? And in our small group, Robert was kind of helping me also understand that, about how some leaders kind of put off this air about them of superiority, and it creates kind of like a feeling that, you can't approach them, you can't go in that same room with them, you don't have like maybe a comfortable voice among them, and really that's completely what Maisha said, unproductive space, right? People will disengage from that. Lisa,
if I could add just something to come to mind, and why we do always want to bring back decision making to include voice and data to the best of our abilities, but also just appreciation of the way that even within California that I've noticed for the transparency of data, and also the disaggregation, right? I mean, we don't like to, it's always student first language, of course, and not wanting to group or subgroup students, but just the way that we do and that we can report out and disaggregate it's just a testament to the acknowledgement that there are issues that can only be seen when you disaggregate at that student subgroup level. And it is also a great way to track some of that progress and be intentional with this work.
That's great. Thank you, Robert. And Lisa, I wanted to give you a chance. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
I was in the group with Maisha, and I believe she captured it all.
All right, cool. All right, so we're going to go on our 5-minute break. This will be our last break, and then we'll come back and finish it up. So Jen Vermillion, would you be willing to read this restorative servant leadership slide?
Sure. So restorative servant leadership puts others ahead of his or her agenda, is intentional about others' needs, is available to them, and able to accept their ideas and desires as important, possesses the confidence to serve. How we treat others is a reflection of how we think about ourselves, initiate service to others. Great leaders see the need, seize the opportunity, and serve without expecting anything in return.
Thank you, Jen. And then, Jen, is there anything in here that kind of resonates with you at all?
I mean, it all resonates. I think one thing that was kind of interesting to think about was how we treat others as a reflection of how we think about ourselves. I hadn't really thought of that, but that's just kind of interesting to think about. Yeah. Yeah,
and I think, Jen, one thought behind that is that, if somebody's treating you in a way that is kind of, again, demeaning and devaluing, or treating you as like less than they are, it really is a lot of times because they have some kind of inferiority complex, which they try to think of themselves as better than, and so it reflects on themselves, right?
Right.
So, that's kind of that whole thing of, that's, one of the reasons why we really need to accept and embrace ourselves, so that we can then be that way with other people as well. So thank you for checking that out for us. And then Lisa, would you be willing to read this next one for us, please?
Yes, restorative servant leadership continued is not position or titles conscious. Servant leaders do not focus on rank or position. They are one person trying to help another. Being the leader means having a sense that it is a privilege to serve. Serves out of love. Servanthood is fueled by love. The extent of your influence depends on the depth of your concern and love for others.
Thank you, Lisa. Now, is there any phrase or part of this that resonates with you?
All of it. But what really stood out was does not focus on rank or position.
And what does that mean to you, that does not focus on rank or position?
I mean, those are fleeting anyway, but just really that's not our identity, is not in our rank or position. It's in our character. It's in the love that we demonstrate. It's in our being. And so, positions come and go, titles change. But who you are at the core is your character, and that dictates how you treat others. I think when a person is focused on their rank or position, it's that's rooted in something that is not real. It's not solid. It doesn't define us.
Wow, that's powerful. God, thank you, Lisa. That was excellent. Well put. And Jen Hansel, what about yourself? Is there any part of this that resonates with you?
I feel like if the other person puts off this air of like, well, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine, I feel like that's very inauthentic. And it kind of goes with the whole love thing. That they're doing it for another reason and not really for, the best interest of whoever you're doing it for. There's an expectation that you're going to have to do something in return.
That's really well. But did you mean this slide or this slide?
Yeah, they're both kind of, I'm talking about how, when you do something out of love, people know it. The kids know when you're fake and when you're not, and so do people in general. And so people know when you're not doing something authentically and you're going to expect something in return. That's kind of where I see there being problems. And that's kind of what stuck out to me, because I think love, Mahatma Gandhi's Goli Muhammad, sorry. Her whole joy thing is just it's just inspired me this year, and this whole last year is just instilling joy and figuring out where is the joy coming from, and how do I give joy to others.
Wow, powerful. Way to go. I like how you focused on that, authentic love and ultimately the joy that comes with it. It's not like I did this and now I'm going to expect this from them. And it's kind of like almost like a capitalistic type of thing, but thank you for that. And I see that Lon, she gave you that signal like 100. So Lon, would you mind commenting on something that may have resonated with you?
Yeah, I think the idea of authenticity, it's something that is embodied, right? And I feel like one of the things, like, as they say, right, communication is mostly nonverbal between people, and like we have this like powerful capacity to pick up on the energy of other people. And so that part about authenticity and like you really can't fake this. You have to be about it. And so that's what I was given the 100% emoji to.
That's awesome. Thank you, Lon. And we always say authenticity breeds authenticity, especially in the circle. And that's like an essential thing for effective restorative practices, for people to be authentic. And there's some kind of, I like that Lon kind of points us to almost like an energy. And you can feel it when you've been in circle with authentic people. It's like there's a very powerful energy there that is unlike other kinds of settings. And it's and it reminds me a lot that, power oftentimes goes in circles. I mean, we just saw this massive hurricane, and what did it do? It went in circles, right? You saw, especially around that eye, how powerful everything's just moving in that circle. And so what we see in restorative practices is that authenticity brings the power of the circle to be able to be restorative. And people, I think that Jen was talking about, people can feel that love. You can feel the authenticity. It's something, human beings can sense these things. So just thank you all for your comments. Really, really helpful. And so what we want to ask each of you is this: what are strategies restorative leaders can employ to help restore the broken relationships between students and the school community? So what I'm kind of pointing towards here is that we know that some students have come from generational trauma, things that have happened in their community that have made them feel demeaned and devalued, and so they distrust the school community, partly from that, but also their own personal experiences where they have felt maybe in previous schools that they felt demeaned and devalued and not wanted. And now they come to your school, but they're not just going to immediately just trust you. They're not going to immediately trust your school community. So what strategies can you use as a restorative leader to help to restore that broken relationship? Robert's going to put us into circles for about 6 minutes. So you'll have maybe a couple of minutes each to say your piece, and then we'll come back. All right, Maisha, anything about strategies that as restorative leaders we can use to help to restore those, the broken relationships?
So we talked about a few things. One of the things that that we use in our district is we welcome our families. We do reentry meetings with our families just so we can create that space where we're listening, to our students, to the families. And most times we're welcoming them back from uncomfortable situations like suspension or expulsion. So this is our time and our opportunity to listen to them and to talk about ways that we can help them become successful as they transition back to their, homeschool environment. We also talked about how beneficial we saw the advisory, platform or method, because that gives students the opportunity to build relationships with their teachers and relationships with their peers. And it's an ongoing relationships because those advisory spaces are, 2 years or 4 years, so when a student is transitioning from a larger space to an advisory type family, that is another way that they are kind of like restoring that harm or trust that they've experienced in their previous educational environment. So,
oh, that's great. And, interestingly enough, Maisha, I was thinking about, when you look at the California Healthy Kids Survey data over a time, usually it's saying, I see the same trends. Elementary schools, kids are reporting, oh yeah, I got plenty of trusted adults. It's all good here. That's the basic thing you get. And then when it gets into middle and high school, it just kind of dissipates. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it is because they're in one classroom, almost like how you were saying, you have the advisory period, you said it's 2 or 4 years or whatever, but it's like, I love that concept because I think especially middle schoolers and high schoolers, they need to come together on a consistent basis that actually is about them. And it's not just about content. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. Gabe, do you have any comments?
We were part of the same group. And so all I mentioned from my experience was something I like to do is just take advantage of the fact that we're a small school. We oftentimes can identify who the new students are. And so we're just loving on them from the moment they step through the gate, greeting them, introducing ourselves, asking about them, and trying to connect them with other kids at our school. And then I think, there have been times where because of that previous experience, like you mentioned, they feel like they have already had a path, carved out for them and this is who they need to be. Mm-hmm. And so, just letting them know that like, you don't have to be that person here, you can really be yourself and let your guard down and hopefully feel like, it's a fresh start. And so, sometimes that is communicated not only in a conversation, but also simply by not just simply reacting to a behavior and throwing a consequence their way, but instead like giving them the opportunity to reset and using those restorative questions, using different things, but showing that like we don't do things like you might be accustomed to at your previous in your previous experience. And so, but I think the proactive piece is so important. And sometimes it's just as simple as a conversation and just connecting with a student for a couple minutes if they're a new face and just wanting them to know a little bit about their school. So as like the principal, I'll come up and I'll be like, hey, this is who I am. Like, what questions do you have about our school? And, typically the middle schoolers, they won't say anything. And so I'm like, I bet you're probably wondering about this. And then I'll just start throwing stuff out. But I just want them to feel welcome from the moment they step on to our campus.
That was, I don't know if anybody else felt it, but I definitely felt the power of what you were sharing. Like, because I feel like your school has intentionally decided and strategically does proactive things to say, we're going to be a healing space for the kids, especially these kids that are coming in from different schools. And oftentimes they're coming with brokenness, right? They're coming because people have demeaned them and devalued them, and they didn't feel they could be their authentic self. And the things you said was like, dude, that was awesome. I'm serious. I'm like, yeah, that is a healing place.
Right. It's something as simple as, before we talked about like people, not numbers, and like learning a kid's name. And like, so if I'm able to, I see them the next day, and when you see them like, hey, so-and-so, like you're already using their name, easier said than done sometimes, like, dang, but it's about being prepared for that, right? Like I'm actively going to seek out this student today and I'm going to use their name. And that just shows that like someone's noticing them. And so I think it goes a long way.
It does. That shows somebody that you value them and that you care, and that they start to get that sense of belonging. And it does mean a lot for a young person that a principal would take the time to really be proactive and reach out to them. And, hey, I bet you're thinking about this or that and the other. And then the next day, all of a sudden you call them out and they're like, what? This is completely foreign to some of them, but that's what we have to do. You're trying to restore the brokenness that has been caused before they come to your school. So that's why I'm so excited about it. I'm like, yes, a healing environment for our kids. So thank you, Gabe. I appreciate that. I wanted to just show this. So that kind of restorative community in the indigenous communities like this, it's more, they really honor their connections and their unity. It means a lot to indigenous communities to be able to kind of have that thing like Ubuntu or in Lakesh, like, it's kind of that same concept, but of you are the other me. And that's what we're trying to get with these restorative justice practices, is for people to have a chance to recognize, like Gabe said, yeah, I understand you went through some things at your other school, but this school's different, and let it be something different for you where you're valued and you can begin to connect and be your authentic self, and we're going to welcome you. So it's just exciting to hear these things. And I know that, many of us, we've already seen this social discipline window. And just wanted as a reminder that restorative leader is in the with, is holding a high standard, but they're providing the support so they can reach the high standard. And one of the things that we like to say is that restorative leader accepts people where they are, and then encourages them and tries to move them to higher levels, but always is there to say, here's the support that you need to get to that high level. And the opposite would be in the two would be that thing of, okay, here in our school, these are our standards. And unless, if you don't make those standards, here's your punishment that's awaiting you. And it's like, well, where's the support? What if this child doesn't have the wherewithal to be able to achieve that? Or what about your staff? What if your staff doesn't have the wherewithal to achieve that? Are you willing to step in and say, we are going to support you so you can be successful? And that really is that leader that has this growth mindset, right? Accepting people where they are today, providing them the supports they need to improve, and celebrating their improvements as they grow, supporting people through trauma and into resilience. So my hope is that, everything I've heard from you all, I think you all have this, right? That growth mindset. And then this kind of it's like the social discipline window but it's really focused on the relationship, right? So that in the with, right, we're talking about people as human beings to be honored. And that's the way I felt when Gabe was talking, right? This young person, new child comes into the school, and I'm going to do everything I can to make them know at this school, you're honored and there's unconditional acceptance here. And so the power is with that child. But it's, again, that old place was the power over the child, that two is people as objects to be managed, and there's a real conditional acceptance. And by the way, when it says unconditional acceptance, it still means that there's, there still are boundaries, there's still consequences, but the human being knows that I'm accepted, I'm cared for here, and that my principal, reaches out to me. And so this is going to be, I think, this one's our last small group share. But what we ask you to do is to identify a restorative leader in your life, and share how they helped you become a better leader. What are things that you learned from them that you try to emulate today? So, right, just think of that, who that person was that was in this kind of with box, right? They really treated you in a way that you felt honored. You felt that they truly provided you the supports that you needed to achieve and to grow where you needed to go. So, Lon, did you mind if I start with you? And just, is there anybody that you were able to identify as somebody who was that kind of more restorative leader?
I had a little bit of a hard time, so I focused on the qualities in someone. What was a more restorative quality? And that was a principal I worked for. And the one thing that he did really well was really actually valued what people had to say and was always available to listen to people's concerns and to acknowledge those concerns, and to give those concerns space. And so that's something that I try to do as well is, and that requires slowing down. And I think slowing down is hard, but that was mine.
That's great. Thank you, Lon. And thank you for that. That's a reminder to all of us, right? When we listen to people, just listen to their concerns, acknowledge them, slow down. Thank you for that. And Jen Hansel, what about you?
Yeah, Lon and I were in the same group. And for me, it was just having the courage to have faith in me to take a risk. I think as leaders, it's hard to have all the answers. And I think a good leader learns how to trust their colleagues and the professionals around them. And when a leader gives you that opportunity to be the one with the answer, and you have an idea and just run with it, go with it, do it, and provide you feedback that's not critical, but hey, that didn't work, but what about this? Go back to the drawing board and come back to me with how this is going to work. And I told Lon, outside the box, within the box. I'm always thinking about how can we do this? I know it's not standard, but here I have this idea, and just, really giving people the opportunity to be the authority in things, and giving them the empowering people to be something that they don't think they can, or someone that they wouldn't typically be.
I really, really like that, Jen. Thank you for just articulating so well that empowerment, right? And somebody truly empowering somebody and encouraging them to, supporting them through that. So thank you. So Maisha, what about you?
So I talked about being able to have that opportunity to work alongside a restorative practitioner, like yourself in a previous district, and being able to apply what we learn about restorative practices, like in the classroom or amongst our staff and like a professional learning community, but then applying that to like actual real world work when we are working with students, and having that person as an early administrator, be there to like help with some of the decisions that I wanted to make, like an impulsive decision, but having him be there to mentor and coach me, to look at it from a restorative mindset. and knowing that some of those decisions that I was making were going to have a lasting impact on my students and families. So without that person's guidance, I don't think I would be where I am today. And I was sharing with my group that I never got a chance to thank him. So I just sent him a text message right now.
Oh, that's powerful. Wow, man. That's the first, I don't know if I've ever heard that in these kinds of conversations. I really appreciate though how real that is for you, that it came up so big for you. You're like, you know what? There's no better time than right now, man. Let me send them a message and gratitude, right? I'm assuming. So thank you.
Yes.
And then Lisa, what about you?
I shared that I had two leaders that came to mind. One was a pastor, and the other is my current leader, who is the director of our school. Both individuals really, I felt, were invested in my success and saw potential in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself, and pushed me out of my comfort zone into my greatness. One of the mantras I used to tell myself was, I'm not a public speaker. And to the point where I would get physically ill if I had to speak in front of groups of people. It was just a story I had told myself my whole life. And they didn't buy into that story. And so I had the pastor who would just put me up and you're going to teach this lesson and you're going to do it. And I did. And then my director, as well, just really pushing me in areas that were outside of my comfort and allowed me to fail, but, did not buy into that's who I was, and then allowed me to continue and developed me and taught me and coached me. So those are the two examples that I shared.
That was powerful. I think Jen Hansel, you talked about authenticity. That was authenticity, right? You just felt it, like you could just feel the power of that. These people who just said, no, Lisa, you're going to go and do that. And, that's not going to be your story. You're not going to, hide behind all the, whatever. I just find those people to be very, I don't know, some powerful leaders, I think. So thank you. And then Gabe, what about you?
I just shared someone that when I first was thrust into this role of principal, I mentioned that I was a teacher at the time, and there was a mid-year situation at my school, and they asked if I would step in, and I had no idea what I was doing, and so. But thankfully, I had a colleague at one of our sister schools who stepped up and took the initiative. I didn't even reach out. He called me and he's like, hey, man, I know what you must be going through. He mentioned and he spoke from experience. And so, when you showed the graphic before about the high expectations and then the high support, I definitely felt like he was helping to set a standard of just not even in anything he was saying, but just sharing some of, his experience and some of what he was doing at his school. But I felt just so supported throughout that process. I felt like I could be vulnerable with him and be honest. And it was just, he just really helped to mold me and shape me into, who I am now as a leader. And I feel like, as was mentioned in several different examples here, definitely pushed me beyond I was just trying to survive the year, and it helped me to understand that we got to set some goals, and you can really help to push our program forward and play an integral part in that. And so just being able to have some guidance in that process and support was just so valuable.
God, that's powerful. I mean, these people that you all are bringing up, it's I don't know, they're just really special people. You know what I mean? You even Gabe, as you were saying, you didn't call him. I mean, he reached out to you. He was proactive and said, hey, my colleague's probably suffering with this stuff, and I'm going to go there. And you said, he just was very empathetic and understanding and supportive. I just think these are the people, these are the restorative leaders who have who have really helped to shape us, right? And it's very powerful to hear those about those people. And then my hope is that if I was to talk to some of your colleagues at some point, they would say you, right? Right, that they would say, hey, you know, they came, they were proactive. They didn't just let me settle into my fears, and they called me. They said, no, you're going to do this presentation, or you're going to do this, and they called you to be your highest self. But they didn't just do it like, if you don't do it, here's your punishment that awaits. It's more like, I'm gonna walk with you. You know, I'm gonna be there with you as you're doing that difficult task. And so I just really, really appreciate all of your sharing, everything, your authenticity, your vulnerability. Amazing how we were just talking in our small group about how powerful it is listening to you all, and just kind of going, man, sometimes the smaller groups are better because they're just so intimate. And I don't know, it just, because we were looking at how many people are scheduled like in the next months coming up, and there was like kind of a big amount. And so I was like, God, it's so cool to have this at the beginning of the school year like this. So
absolutely. Just to add on to that, as I love looking at the registration list before any of our trainings, and even just the concept we talk about, like collaboration. I mean, as far as modeling, I love to see the diverse diverse range of talents, of position, wherever it's coming from, because it is a collaborative effort. I mean, there's no solution that's housed any one place. And I was even thinking about what they were sharing is, I meeting some few of you for the first time today. Just, you know, your impression of others, you know, you see these confident, capable people. And, you know, it also seems to be a theme of confidence kind of being tested within this last year in a lot of ways. For all of us, regardless of how much experience we've had, it's almost like, you know, first or second year educators, because there's been so much new and so many new challenges. But it's also just very encouraging, and just seeing just in action, and as we try to figure out the next you know, these next steps, that you know, there's just so much resiliency and successes that have happened, not to romanticize or some of these struggles and challenges, but it's just so encouraging, and I appreciate all you all for sharing so authentically and being able to be a part of today.
Great, thank you, Robert. And Jen, by the way, if you don't know Jen, this is Jen's first day back from maternity leave, so I just really appreciate her, you know, joining us. And Jen, any final comments?
Well, it was just a really nice way to kind of come back after just being gone for a while. So kind of similar to what you've all been sharing. It's just been a really great group to kind of come back to, and really kind of be inspired by also, and remembering that the work is still continuing, and especially I've got now 3 that are, well, 1 that's already in the education system, and then 2 more that are kind of on their way in. And so it's just good to be reminded that there are good leaders out there too, that, you know, my own kids are going to benefit from, as well as the kids that we are working to support. So
that's great. Thank you. So hopefully that was helpful to you. And if you're going to be able to make it tomorrow, we'll be talking about that sort of implementation at a site, and the site sustainability, and that will be it. So I hope, yeah, and thank you, Robert, for sharing that, and also sharing we have our monthly collaborative meetings and other things there that he shared. So please go ahead and do that feedback, and then have a great rest of your afternoon and evening.